What is up, guys? You're tuning into this Okiru podcast. I'm your co-host, Jasper, and we thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope you enjoy this episode. Make sure to follow us on our socials at Okiru on Instagram, Okiru on Facebook, Okiru on YouTube, and also Okiru on major platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope you enjoy.
Okiru.
Rosie, welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
Traveling well. This is our second episode in, I guess, a new series that we're posting on young multicultural leaders. And I'm just looking around and multicultural leaders are all around me. And it makes sense when you're working with the Centre for Multicultural Youth. Hey,
Yeah.
we've got our boy MC Kano on last week.
Very good.
And we've got yourself as our new chairwoman of the youth-led unit and a name unknown. We're not releasing it just yet. So
It's a surprise. It's coming.
stay tuned. How have your experiences been as a year 12 school leaver, finishing up during COVID, essentially, doing year 12 in COVID, and then off to university, but finding the Centre of Multicultural Youth. And I guess we all have our stories of how we got connected. Right? What was yours?
Well, working at CMY has been literally life-changing. I found, as you said, Liam, I did year 12 in COVID. So we were the first year to kind of graduate as COVID babies. That was in itself a whole experience, story. I think throughout year 12 and 10 and 11, I found kind of my feet and I found myself in leadership positions, and I was like, look, there is just so much not being said about, society that we're living in, whether that be inequities within the system, inequities within the VCE system, COVID, or whether that be just racism and discrimination. And I think when I was in year 11, I kind of realized I couldn't volunteer at ASRC, for example, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. I couldn't do all these things because I was under the age of 18. So that's when I just discovered my my local council's youth jury, they call it. And I joined that in year 11, and that was amazing because it was, linking me up with like-minded people. I was able to advocate to council for issues that I cared about, and I was able to do it while I was under the age of 18. And then, I guess moving into 2020, at the end of 2020, I saw, I'm not actually sure how I discovered it, but CMY was advertising the youth-led unit. That's how I know you, Liam. And I just applied. I was not expecting to get it at all. I don't think when I applied, I realized the gravity of what this unit was. And just been there since then, and we've expanded, obviously. I guess, how have you found it, Liam? I think I'm the youngest as well of the group, and I just feel so honored to have that role because we have IT specialists, we've got doctors, we had all these amazing qualified people, and I'm just coming out of high school, and it's been crazy.
So what surprised me was you're the youngest, I'm the oldest of the group, and I've got almost 10 years on you, right? And for me, that was like, whoa, I'm still young. I still consider myself young, but I guess on the older side of being young, if that makes sense. And it's been a great point to connect and to meet, I guess, fascinating people who are movers and shakers in their own communities. But it seems like you've got this fire and this passion in you to make a change. Where did this all come from?
Yeah, well, that's been something I've been exploring this past year, pretty much to the dot. I'm actually adopted. So I was adopted when I was 3 months old in Australia. And I was, need to preface, I was born in Australia. When I talk to people that I'm adopted, sometimes they're like, oh, so dropped on a doorstep. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. And I think that's been something I've been exploring this past year. I've actually reconnected with my birth mother in the past year, which has been just, I think I've just been discovering a lot about identity. And I think it's all kind of been this whirlwind because I'm studying kind of global studies at university, and I was doing these subjects on First Nations, racism and social justice. And I was having to write these essays and I was having to interrogate my subject position to race. And this was kind of before I had actually discovered my biological mum, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I think I've always been quite aware of my privilege. I think I've always been really grateful for the life I've been given. I've grown up in this like little left-wing progressive bubble in Northcote, and I think I've been really aware of that since I was little. But having to actually interrogate my subject position and write like how racism could have been maybe stronger if I was born into another family, or if I was, born somewhere else, has been quite a lot. And I think going to university last year, and meeting people with different ideological viewpoints and different life experiences, and they kind of classifying me as a person of color was really, really interesting. And that's something that I kind of could talk about. It's so much. So I don't really know where to start with it.
That sounds a lot to unpack, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, what was that feeling like discovering that you were adopted and then finding your birth mother?
Yeah. So I've always known I was adopted.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't like a guess what, Rosie?
Right.
In the movies. Like I watch movies like that. I'm just like, that's just not how. Like shouldn't be how it works. But I can't really remember when my mum and dad told me I was adopted. My parents are both white too, so it's, I guess, I mean, some of my friends say it's not that obvious, but it's pretty obvious. But
they're white, but what's their cultural backgrounds as well?
Yeah, not much. Like I guess, they're Australian, English, German, But my brother, he's younger than me, he's also adopted, but not from the same biological family. So he looks very different to me. So that's probably where the you can tell. But I guess just what was your question again?
I guess what was that feeling like, just finding your birth mother?
Yeah, the story of how that unfolded.
The $1 million question. So I guess I can give you the whole like how it started, how I did it, because I want to ask you, do you know anyone else that is adopted?
I had one mate. And we weren't very close, but to see his journey of like finding his birth mother and then like them getting reconnected, I think that was an incredible story. Like I think he wrote a letter to his mother, and it was like quite a, emotional journey.
Yeah.
But I didn't get to speak to him about it, right? But I was just really, I guess I kind of seeing it from a different lens, just seeing it like, wow, like to see him connect with his mother, like at such, I think he was in his early 20s when he found out who his real mother was. And it was like I think he had a supportive parents as well. So they were doing their best to find who his mother was. And I think she was all the way in like South Korea.
Yeah, wow.
So it was pretty far.
Incredible.
Yeah. So it was cool to see them get connected and build a relationship through the lens of social media.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
For me, no, you're the only one, Rosie, and I can't even comprehend what that would feel like, all the questions you have growing up, right?
Yeah, definitely wondering every single day of my life. Like, there's no other really way to put it. Like, I'd say I've done like quite a lot of work this year to kind of unpack this, and a lot of new emotions have come up since. But I just remember like since probably prep, age of 6, like I'd be like to kids, hey, like I'm adopted. And like, what a 6-year-old meant, like they no one knows. But I guess all the people I've spoken to, no one can count more than 5 people on their fingers. Like it's a really rare thing. But just something you brought up, you're like, oh, he's connected to his real mum. That's really interesting in itself, because like let's say I'm in prep, I'm like, hey, I'm adopted, and kids would be like, oh, cool, like have you met your real mum? And that was something I can like memorize this off by heart. I'd be like, oh no, actually my real mum is the mum I have now, like my real mum is my mum. And ever since the age of 6, I've really, I don't know how it was ingrained in me. My mum, maybe it was mum saying, no, like I'm your mother. But that's something that I really like have learned, that I'm like, wow, that's actually like unconsciously I've done that since I was 6. And I was talking to my psychologist about this, and she was like, wow, that's really interesting. You correlate real with adoptive mum, because in scholarly discourse, it's real equals biological, which is really, really interesting. Because when she told me that, I was like, what? Like, that's like, I can't comprehend that. Like, my mum is my mum. Like, she's my real mum. But I guess maybe for children who haven't been in permanent care since they were little, it makes sense that they're like real equals biological. But yeah, for me, it just, I guess that was something I've learned this year. I was just shocked. I was like, no, like, my mum is my mum. Like, that's something I've always had to really use that type of language, use that discourse. So that's been really interesting. But yeah, like, it's always kind of just been like a story to me. It's always been something, I'm going to finish high school and I'm going to do it. Like, it's going to be a journey. And I'm going to, and that's something I did. It is a journey, and it's happened, and I can't really believe that it's happened, because it's been like, I literally can't explain it. But yeah, I guess the process, I guess it, just to reemphasize, like, it's so rare, adoption. I think I was talking to my mum and dad before this, and my grandma actually, and she was like, I think in the year that you were born, 2002, there were 16 local adoptions in the whole year. Like, it's so rare. And then we were looking at some stats, and in like 2010 to 11, of all adoptions in Australia, only 12% were local. And then the rest were like inter-country. And then maybe 30% were like, I don't know, let's say stepmom to grandma or something. So yeah, just crazy how I kind of ended up with like the most amazing family like in the world. Like, I can't, like, it makes me really emotional, because I'm like, how did that happen? Anyway, oh my God, don't want to cry. Anyway,
no, that's okay, because at 3 months old, when you were adopted, you had that safety that whole time as an infant till to now, for the last 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why it makes sense for me that you're calling your adoptive mum your real mum as well, because it's that feeling that we've been able to develop, and that connection with each other over time.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I might as well just go through the process, because it's really interesting. Like, do you kind of have any idea how you do it? Like, how you track down someone that like has like no idea, or like
the yellow pages?
Idea where you are. Yeah, literally. Like, I wish it was that simple just to know. Yeah. Anyway, so I started doing this in, I'd say it was last year. Yeah, October probably. October, November, and the department, I think it's called Department of Justice Adoption Agency, I don't really know. You're not allowed your records until you're 18. So I'm not allowed to know her last name. I'm not allowed to, I don't really know anything. Right. I think compared to my brother, I've felt quite lucky. I've had a photo of her. My parents actually met her when she was young. So I've always had this vision of this woman in my head. I've always been like, this is her. So it's been great to put a face to the name. So yeah, when I turned 18, I applied to I applied to adoption agency, sorry. And I had this interview with this woman, and I got access to about 200 documents, 200 pages of like blurted out other families that I could have gone to. Whoa. Like, I got my usual birth certificate, like baby, blah, 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 needs permanent care, like immunization records, like everything. And I got access to the last name. And then from there, I had to track someone down, you need their full name. Like, you need to sort out where they live. And I couldn't just search her up on Facebook, because you don't want to like hit someone up and be like, hey, guess what? I'm here. So yeah, with that information, I had to sort out if this name that I had, including the last name, had changed, if she'd been married or something. Because you need a name to find an address to send a letter. So I had to apply to births, deaths and marriages, and I needed a marriage certificate. So let's say, Jasper, you want your mum's marriage certificate, for example. You'd have to get her permission from births, deaths and marriages to apply. But obviously I couldn't get her permission. But because I did this because I had this interview, I had this little, I call it like a key. So I kind of could just apply, and because I was deemed her natural daughter. So that's kind of how it worked. But so I did that. No one at births, deaths and marriages knew what they were doing. That took about 2 months in itself for them to be like, no, like they were all like, no, you don't get access. And I was like, yes, I do. Eventually they like let me have access, and there was no record of a birth certificate. I'm sorry, a marriage certificate.
Mm.
So I then, that was like, fine, that's fine. It means her name hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
So then one Thursday, I just like walk into the city and there's this computer and it's the electoral roll on it. And I just literally type in a name and an address comes up. Like I could type in any of your names and an address comes up. And like, I don't know, I think when I was going through the process, because this has been something that's like lifelong, like this has been the thing I'm going to do. And yeah, I think it was quite anticlimactic. I was like, oh, here's a address. Like, what am I going to do? You know, because you don't know if it's going to be right.
Yeah.
Right. So I get this address, go home to mum and dad. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like crazy. And I write this letter, I type this letter out and I keep it, you know, I don't have my last name in it or anything. And I just say broadly, like you have to assume that everyone in her life has no idea that I exist. Like that's kind of how you have to. It's very privacy of the biological mum. So I was like, hi, to whom it may concern, I'm looking into my family history. In particular, I'm looking for someone after the name of. If you have any information, let me know. So I sent it with registered post. Obviously, Ozpost had their delays and I kind of just forgot about it. And then, I guess in December last year, I just get this text and I'm like just at babysitting and I was like, oh my gosh. And it was just like the best text you could ever really like comprehend. It was just like, I'm so happy. Like, hey. And then, from there, had a call and then we met and it was just, since then it's been, pretty amazing. I'm pretty lucky that it's been quite smooth and my parents always knew that it would be after meeting her. But I know it's a lot. And
It's so vivid. The way that you share the story, it's like I'm sitting in a movie.
My gosh, I have told
I can see that unfolding in my mind.
No, literally. And I wish I could show you the video of me calling her for the first time because like my friends have cried in shopping centers. They've cried in my room. Like it's been really nice to you know, tell my friends the story. But I guess just reconnecting with someone you can't. And also like in movies, like would you ever watch movies and like if someone, like in movies when someone passes away, I don't really get emotional, but when they reconnect, like ever since I was little, like that's been the thing to just, oh my gosh, I can't do it. Like what would you say is your like, I feel like, it's reconnecting.
I think
for me.
that joyous moment of like that connection happening. Right?
Yeah, reconnecting moments are incredible because I guess as humans, we've all been separated from loved ones before, right? So we can all relate to the feeling, but you've built up this image, this process over 20 years, essentially.
And so it came down to this one day, I'm like driving there, like ready to meet my biological mum, like, oh my gosh, like I was going to vomit. Like I was so nervous. Like I actually, like that was worse than like exams. Like that was so bad. But she's just sitting on this rock and I'm just like, it was pretty crazy.
Can you see yourself in her in terms of facial features?
Yes, so similar, like pretty much. And she was exactly what I thought because I've had this photo of her. She was exactly what I thought. But even like my friends have, you know, seen us together and we have a lot of the same mannerisms and things like that, which is interesting. So it's just kind of been a whole year of kind of sorting out how to integrate these two worlds, which has been really, really difficult. And I guess trying to sort out, you know, what type of relationship I want to have with her because I've always thought about meeting her, never what type of relationship it would be because you can't jump ahead and you can't think like, so that's been like quite hard to sort out. It's kind of,
So what's worked out? It's worked out. You found her, you developed, you're in control of what type of relationship you want.
And I think that word control is really interesting. I think it's taken a while to sort out. Like I think the way I've reacted to the whole meeting process has been quite interesting. Like it's brought up new emotions I've never felt before. So
how about, you mentioned earlier about being classified as a person of color, right? And you're brought up with two white parents in your little left-wing bubble. So last week we spoke to Kano and we were talking about how growing up in an Asian family, we were more risk adverse than if you were growing up with, say, Aussie parents who have been here for generations. Go take risks, go jump off that plane, whatever. right? How have you found growing up as a person of color
Mm.
in a white household, but also knowing that you look in the mirror, hey, I'm not exactly like my parents, but you're Vietnamese and you're got other races mixed into you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been quite it's been quite difficult to try sort that out. Um I'm reading this book at the moment called The Color of Difference, and it's about adoptive people, both inter-country and local adoptions, um, who are obviously, different race to their parents and how they've like dealt with that. And I think a main thing has been like I read some of the stories and their parents haven't exactly been supportive of reaching
Yeah.
out and connecting to their culture. But my parents, for example, I've been to Vietnam. They've been amazing. We've been to the UK for my brother. Like they're just amazing like that. And I think it's something that you really have to, like, when you adopt a child, you really have to think about, different cultures. And I think my parents have done that really well. I guess, pretty much like at uni when I had that interaction with this one person in particular, I had never really been like just labeled like that. Like we were having a debate and it was like, you as a person of color, explain how. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow. Yeah, it was really intense. And I think like, growing up, I guess I had never really thought, Rosie, like you're a person of color, just because, I'd grown up in a, I don't think my relationship to racism has been quite strong as it would, I think, if I was placed anywhere else. But yeah, I guess as I've gone through this process, I've been like, oh, that's a microaggression there. That's a thing there. And I think the only time I've really questioned my identity is when people have asked me, and they still do, like, oh, so what's your ethnicity? And I've been like, and I actually didn't know what my ethnicity was until I did a DNA test a few years ago. I knew I was Vietnamese. I knew she was Vietnamese, and I knew I was half Vietnamese, but I didn't know, where my frizzy hair comes from, for example. It's not like this normally. But where, I didn't know any of that. So after doing the DNA test has been great. But yeah, for example, Ubers would be like, oh, so like what's your ethnicity? I'd be like, oh, Vietnamese and Southeast European, but I don't really know. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? And it's just like people who just think that they like kind of deserve this because I don't know. They kind of just deserve to know. And I'm just like, I literally don't know. Like I can't.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the only time I've like had to been quite difficult. And I've always said like Vietnamese and Southeast European, like don't really know. But yeah, I guess it's not as straightforward as like I'm Vietnamese because I guess I'm not. I can count to 99, but that's about it.
Can you?
Yeah.
Cool.
But that's,
What's 88?
oh, isn't it like you do 10, 8, and then don't you do? I just know the process. I can count to 10 though. But like, don't you know? Isn't it like you do 20, 10 or 2, 10 or something?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I know.
Family them.
Yeah, cool. But yeah, like how about you guys? I guess like, you're not adopted, obviously, but I guess when someone has asked you like, what's your background, like you've been able to kind of say, or not really.
I think I was gonna say like I get mistaken for Samoan or Islander often. Like I'll go to the gym and like you go to the washroom or something and they'll start speaking in like Samoan and I'm like, wait, sorry dude, I'm Filipino, man.
Oh my
like,
gosh.
yeah. It's like, oh, sorry, cause I thought you were like an Usi. I'm like, nah, man. Or I'll get confused for like Indonesian or sometimes Malaysian. Like even in Malaysia, they were speaking to me in Malay. I'm like,
wow.
Sorry guys, I only know English. But yeah, I identify as Australian but Filipino. Yeah, I like to say.
Yeah, as a kid, I would be like, no, I'm Australian.
Yeah.
I'm Australian.
Yeah.
I'm also Vietnamese, but no, I'm Australian. And that's my key identity.
Yeah.
And like a lot of other multicultural people growing up in Australia, I've found much more connection to my culture as I grow even more. I'm always connected and I always speak Vietnamese at home and my family cook the food and I love all the celebrations and traditions that we do. But now I'd happily say I'm Vietnamese Australian, right? And look, I grew up in a very multicultural primary school. So there were a bunch of Vietnamese kids, some Chinese, Lebanese, Italians, some Greeks in there, Maltese. So it was a beautiful melting pot where we grew up, and diversity was always around us. So the racism, if you call it that, is poking fun at each other. I guess it's a casual racism that you learn to tolerate,
Yeah, it's interesting.
but then you dish it out at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agree.
So that's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you got the Asian group, the Wog group,
Yeah.
the Bogans.
Yeah.
So do you identify with being Vietnamese at all? Because in
Yeah.
terms of practices and traditions,
I mean, no, like my parents didn't celebrate Chinese New Year,
yeah,
like
of
that would
course.
have been like no.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say like I think I do need to put an identity to myself. Like I think I do need to label, because like otherwise what would I think I'd feel really lost if I didn't. And I guess maybe it's just like about that knowing. And I guess I went to Vietnam when I was 8. So I was quite young, and I do remember it really distinctly, which is interesting. But I think the fact that my parents took me there so young was really to show me, like, you identify with this culture. And I think in Vietnam, and even like the Vic market, mum says, like the Vietnamese woman, like they can tell. And I'm like, I don't know. But I guess, yeah, the more I grow up, I think I experience a lot more people being like, oh, like really? And I'm like, stop. Because I don't, I guess it's not that easy to pick. I don't know. I guess it may be because it's mixed with, European. But yeah, I'd say like Vietnamese and Australian. Like I definitely would say I like correlate with the Vietnamese culture. But as I've been, exploring my biological mother's side, her mum doesn't speak any English, so being around that is really interesting, because I do feel quite, left out. Like I can't speak any Vietnamese. So at Christmas it was really interesting. I was like, oh wow, like crazy, but you feel quite detached. So that's been something really interesting. Yeah.
So yesterday you shared with us an incredible article, and it was such a, I find it hard saying this word, serendipitous moment when you sent it on WhatsApp, and I was actually reading the article as we spoke. It was incredible. And it was about 2 young Vietnamese mayors in Maribyrnong and Brimbank. So how did you feel reading that article, knowing that you are of a Vietnamese culture?
Well, yeah, it's exactly, what we try to promote at the youth-led unit at Centre for Multicultural Youth. Like we want to see multicultural young people at the forefront of decision-making processes. And I think they're just such good examples of how you can do that. Also examples of like cross-sector collaboration, and how the Vic government, or Vivian, has, is she chairwoman of has helped of Multicultural Commission, has, helped facilitate that. And that's something that we want to do at CMY. But yeah, I guess it's just example of what we want to do. And I guess, yeah, it's inspiring. But I guess in a way, like I hate to, like, I don't, like they obviously spoke about their upbringings and their Vietnamese like culture. And I don't know, sometimes I mean, by definition, like I guess I can work at CMI, but like sometimes I do feel like, oh, maybe I'm taking the floor for like from other people. But I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting because like, Centre for Multicultural Youth, for example, is like migrant and refugee, background. And I guess, my biological mother, her family was migrant here, like came. But I guess, I don't know, I guess I just feel like I belong there because of my passion to make change and alleviate racism. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't think you should be
Yeah, I don't know.
discounting your ability to connect and participate, because you have an individual and unique story in itself, right? And by sharing your story, others you've got this diversity of experiences and thoughts as well, and that is able to bring connection to others.
And I think, the topic of adoption in itself is just so rare. Like there's nothing about it. It was only in 1984 that adoptions became open adoptions. And they were actually realizing the rights of the child and the rights to like know information of your birth identity. And through the 50s and 60s, it was all closed adoption. There was nothing that children could do to really like find out their birth. And the Vic government have provided compensation for that since. And it's just I guess just like the more information out there about adoption, like the better, because no one knows about it, and it's a hard process to connect. And I think especially I think it's really overwhelming because it happened at a time where I was like transitioning from high school, where you're just in your in your bubble really, and then you go to university, and I'm transitioning, I'm learning about the world, I'm learning about like human rights violations, and you're like, oh my gosh, like where do I kind of belong? And I'll always belong like with my mom and dad, but yeah, identity is a really big thing, and I didn't really think about it before I like did this process. And I think it happened really quickly. So my birth mother said to me, she was like, oh, we missed your 18th, like we'll be there for your 21st. And I was like, oh my gosh, like crazy. Like, that's pretty intense.
So how was it connecting at a Christmas party with your birth mother and her mother, your grandma?
Yeah.
Was it a big Vietnamese family?
Yeah, quite a big family. There's 4 of them in the family, or I mean, it could be bigger, but yeah. Yeah, it was great. Like, it was obviously a lot because we had only met about a month before. No, not even a month, like 3 weeks before. And so that whole time kind of was just a lot. It was just straight into like trying to juggle two lives.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was really nice. It was like it was nice. They didn't make it about like all about me. It was nice. It was like felt quite normal, but yeah, it was a lot.
Meeting your cousins.
Yeah, literally, and
uncles
like
and
my
aunties.
uncle is only. I have an uncle that's only like 4 years older than me. Like it's just pretty crazy. Yeah, it was a lot, I guess. Yeah.
It's incredible, and I'm glad you can, I guess, identify and connect with your Vietnamese heritage as well, because that's where my family is from.
Yeah.
And last week I went to an incredible event. It was hosted by the Vietnamese Australian Professional Network. So they got 200 Vietnamese Australians into a single room, and it was the first time that the community has ever engaged in this way. So the energy was electric in there. Everybody was so passionate, and it felt like a family event.
Wow,
because
so nice.
it's your people, and you kind of slip in references that only your people can understand as well. And there's people from all walks of life. So there was a judge magistrate, there was a journalist on the ABC, Danny Tran, some really high-flying corporate lawyers in there, people like myself who are passionate about the community, and a lot of movers and shakers in that room. So look, if you're interested in discovering your identity a bit more, I'd invite you to the next event and come along and meet the peeps.
Yeah, literally. I guess just living in Melbourne, like it's so diverse. So it's really nice, and especially working with communities like the ones we do at CMY. It's just really uplifting and empowering. Yeah.
So what is it that you guys do at CMY? Can you guys touch on that a bit more?
Yeah, Liam will probably be able to synthesize it a bit more than me, but so I guess deriving out of the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, yeah. Centre for Multicultural Youth, which is a organisation based in Melbourne, which are state and federal funded, realised a need for young people to kind of take the lead. They realised that there were not multicultural young people really driving the show at CMY, which is Centre for Multicultural Youth. And so the board kind of invested in this youth-led unit, which has finally had a name change, thank gosh, after 2 years. But yeah, we were literally just given free reign of what to do, what to develop, what to design, and make our own vision. And I guess the whole point of the youth-led unit is to be freestanding from CMY, but still have a correlation and kind of use the resources they do. But since the 2 years that it's been around, we're finally starting to put our programs into action. We've got diversity workshops, online hub, and consultation. Yeah. And we're working with organizations, arms of government, and we, for example, like a organization will come to us and
Yeah.
we'll kind of see if their membership, or what would you like,
Whether
is
their organization is structured to be inclusive
yeah,
for young multicultural
Right.
people.
yeah,
Yeah.
Because look, you and I, Jasper, were born in Australia. We went to school here. You went to Williamstown High School and all that.
Mm.
But you've got other communities who their young people are refugees.
Yeah.
They would have fled wherever they
and they like
called home initially.
yeah, and they
Right.
have this inability to be active citizens, and
Mm.
you know, which is like a term that's actually defined by Mayan. But yeah, and I guess we're just trying to enable young people to, we're going to upskill them to run these diversity workshops, for example, and just giving them the platform to lead and make decisions that influence them as well.
And it's a big.
Yeah.
The meta in it is it's capacity building for us who are involved as well. So Rosie, as a school leaver and as the youngest member, is now the chairwoman, right? So she's leading all the discussions in our board meetings. She's liaising with the executives on the CMY side and also the board as well. And for a 20-year-old, that's an incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking back at 20 years old, I was not doing that, that's for sure.
Just playing video games at home. That's what I was doing.
No, but I wouldn't have been able to do that with like the support of the group that we have, and we have 5 of us are still there from the beginning, and now we've moved into a committee of management, and we have some amazing people with amazing skills and experience. So I guess just the network within the group that we have is just amazing, and very honored to be chairwoman.
So volunteer work is that's what we're doing at the moment. Yeah, we're volunteer committee of management team. And so what that for me has done is it's allowed me to get involved in community, has allowed me to build my skills, to participate, but has also connected me to the Menor Foundation, which is where I work today. So what benefits have you found in volunteering over the years, especially hooking up with your local council as a 17-year-old and participating in all of the other stuff you do too?
Well, I guess just comparing youth-led unit to for example, another advisory group that I've been in, the difference between youth-led and youth advisory is very, very big. The fact that CMY has given this a youth-led initiative is very rare, and I don't think a lot of other non-profit organizations do that. And they, because to have a youth advisory group is still within the structures of a not youth-led structure, if that makes sense, which doesn't. But I guess from there, like I'm now working with the Victorian government in the Multicultural Youth Network, which has been amazing. I think I've become more aware of how council works maybe, and evaluating like how to engage young people in a way that's not tokenistic, that's not reevaluate council plans pretty much. But yeah, from there, like I've just taken, I guess, just anything I see, I'm like, I need to do it. I feel a moral obligation, and I think being in the unit has just really changed my perception of how much you can, and if you can't do it, how you need to do it. I think as I said, like the networks within there, like it's just great to be able to work with Vic Health, for example, or do a consultation with Municipals Council of Victoria, things like that. Has been really nice, and to end up on a podcast like this. But I think.
What advice for other young people would you give on your volunteer work and the benefits it's brought you in connecting with governments top to bottom? How would you encourage others to get involved, and why should they get involved?
Yeah, well, I feel like my why is like I have to. Like I genuinely feel like a moral obligation. I've been placed in this family who has given me like the most amazing resources, most amazing life experiences, and like I need to do something with that privilege, because I could have literally ended up anywhere else. Like I think that's what it comes down to. But for other people that might not be the case. But I think you look at the world and you look at Australia, and we're just such a prosperous nation, and I just feel like there's so much more we could be doing. but I guess to anyone who's like wanting to get involved, whether that be youth work, youth council, anything, just look to your local council, I think is, or look to other organisations like Youth Affairs Victoria, Council of Victoria are really good. There's just so many things to do, and once you're in the know, you're in the know. I think it's just that first step of getting in there. And yeah, when I joined council, for example, I didn't really know what my main passion was, but over the years, you kind of discover that. And you know, a lot of my friends think climate's the main one, and whilst that is important, I think it's racism, discrimination. Like, there's lots of different subcategories to care about, and there's so much to do. And I think, you know, in a world of social media and digitalization, there's so much you can do that's, you know, on your phones, and ways to not be tokenistic about it. But yeah.
I feel the same in terms of, it feels like not a moral obligation, but a yearning and a desire to give back and to connect with others in these spaces as well, because my family came here with absolutely nothing, right? And it's, I'm fortunate enough to carry this little blue book that allows me usually hypermobility throughout the world. I can go anywhere, really. The Australian passport is just so powerful, right? And being born into the birth lottery as well, where I call this place my home, and there's millions of others knocking down the door trying to get in, but they can't because of all the bureaucracy and the red tape that prevents them to do so, right? So I feel extremely lucky.
What would you say to people if they're maybe hesitant about getting involved? Like, what would you?
I'd say to try and find out what areas of the world that you'd love to change, for example, right? And for me, it's capacity building of young people to be active citizens. And that's exactly when I found CMY, I was like, they're doing the exact same thing. This is incredible. Like, sign me up right now, right? And by helping build others up, you build yourself up. And in turn, we all rise together. So Jasper, because we're talking about how we're involved in community, right? With the Okiru community, by building yourself up, in turn, you help build others, and you kind of raise the standards of living and quality of connection. How have you found it in the past 2 years?
Wow, it's been an amazing journey. Wow, where can I start? I think we only started the podcast last year, so really getting into these conversations is very young. Before that, it was just focus on product development and really building ourselves, Gerald and I, right? Discovering techniques and tools that can help us in the business world. And then once we built the confidence, because when we started this journey, we were like, oh man, we're having amazing conversations with all these our mates. And it's like, damn, I wish we had a podcast where we could record these conversations. And we were so afraid to start. And then one day we were just like, all right, we got the mics. Let's bring it out. Let's just have a conversation, see where it goes. And it was just the start of us like having these conversations that we believe are important to us. And I guess we were inspired by the other people who were in this space. There's over 1 million, 2 million podcasts or whatever out there, right? But it was so hard to connect to those people we were listening to because they were at the level at the top already. So we're like, let's try to take a different approach and like talk to the people in our world, right? And see what they've done with their stories, what they've learned, and all the experiences, and share on this platform. And I guess that's what we've been trying to do, right? It's what our mission is helping others build their mastery in their own universe, and starting with ourselves. And I guess I hope that kind of answers your question. But the journey, we're still learning. We're always learning, always be learning, right? And always be growing as much as we can. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought with that question.
Do you ever, like, I guess to both of you, do you ever feel like discouraged by, you said you know, there are 2 million other podcasts out there, for example. 2 million or 2,000? No, you don't.
Millions.
Millions is a
podcasts
lot.
out there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, like, I don't know, do you ever feel, I guess, in the work we do, are you just like, wow, like there's so much to change? Or do you always kind of see it on a micro level? Or
Look, I think we just found something we love doing, right? And if you love doing what you're doing, like, why look at what everyone else is doing? I guess we just use it as inspiration for what we do, right? We learn from the people who have done it best, and we I guess, like, review that and see what we can take from them
yeah.
into our own conversations. And it can be like a very toxic game of like, oh man, these guys are doing this and that, and it can be discouraging. But it's just always remembering, like, are we enjoying this? Are we enjoying what we're doing? Like, are we enjoying talking to the people that we have on our podcast? And if it's yes, then why stop? It doesn't matter about the numbers. Like Lim said, it's like the numbers are a vanity, right? Why not just focus on what we're doing right now instead of, like, the numbers will come eventually. The more people we talk to, the more podcasts we release, the longer we do it, the longer we put our foot into on this space. Like what we discuss is like people stop at like 12 or whatever podcasts, and because they get so discouraged by the numbers. And we're almost at like 50, right?
We are 50. This is
this is the
podcast
50th.
episode 50.
Wow.
Rosie.
Honored, guys.
So it's been an incredible journey.
Yeah.
Right?
What about in like youth work, Liam? Do you feel like?
Well, just back on that question that you asked Jasper, it's because we love doing what we're doing, and I get so much energy from having these conversations with amazing young people, amazing people in our community. And there's no better feeling than walking out after a beautiful podcast, usually on a Sunday arvo, when you're just driving home, and it's like, wow, we've really connected with our guests. We talked about real shit, really, and not the superficial, like we may do every day. We talk about things that matter to us.
Yes.
And sometimes it is discouraging when you post some snippets or you post some content out on social media and it's like no one is engaging. Like it's going nowhere. But you can feel that people are watching in and listening in, and the small comments that people send you just out of the blue. Thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking to amazing young people in our community. It really is encouraging.
It's literally just those like sorry, did I interrupt you?
No,
No,
go
it's
ahead.
literally those like single words of encouragement that like really, like, I think make purpose, because I think, well, I noticed this when I was in year 11. I think I was 17 or 18. I was doing this panel about racism discrimination at a local council event, and I was just talking, and I was like, like, we have to, I don't know, what was I saying, stand up or something, and I was like, someone says something, you gotta talk back. Like, that's the only way you're gonna stop discriminatory comments. And this guy came up to me after, and he was like, Rosie, like, I feel like this when I get scared when I see police, but like after what you said, that just really changed my perception of things, and I do have a place here. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even realize I said something like that. And I think it's just those like words of encouragement, and that, like, not in a bad way, but those words of validation, because and like I don't think validation necessarily has to be a bad thing. I think it is normal, like, in the society that we live. But just those small like comments, this was a great podcast, or those small things, like, I think really just shape purpose. Because
I like to think of it as like we're just planting seeds, right? Like the bamboo tree, you plant it, you don't see it grow after like 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's that as long as you keep watering it, you keep doing it, eventually it will sprout up into a bamboo tree, right? It's our first year of doing this, really. So we can't really judge the impact on the 1 years of what we've done. And it's that patience, delayed gratification of the work that you do, whatever it is you're doing.
And I encourage everybody to, if you see amazing things in your community, or if you come across great people doing just great work, right? Just send them a message of encouragement, because those words
for them as well, like, I think
can really go a long way to helping them continue what they're doing, because sometimes it could be a slow slog, and life gets in the way, and they know that they want to be doing their passion work, but they may be, I don't know, feeling low or something at that point. So send words of encouragement to the people that you look up to and all around you. It really goes a long way.
Yeah, and I also think just like I think seeing something grow from when it like began as well. I think the youth led unit's kind of the first thing in my life where I've been like, wow, I was here from the start. Like Okiru for you would be like, that's your baby, like it's your thing. And in a way, like I wonder if Liam, you feel the same, but like the youth led unit, it's just like, wow, we literally created that. Like we were there from the start. And I think, as you said, like we're not going to see it. We're kind of seeing its impact now already as programs roll out, but you know, we're going to see its impact in 5 years. And I think that's really exciting to be involved in as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely agree. What's next for you, Rosie? You're completing your studies in global
studies and law.
Global studies and law.
Yeah, definitely not completing yet. I have a while to go.
Okay.
It's going to be a long time, but yeah, I think just keep obviously studies, continue working in the background, continue, you know, putting my hand up for things and, you know, using my voice as well. I think I see something and I'm like, I have to do that. Yeah, I hope I've been doing all these applications and all the questions like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I'm like, I don't know. But yeah, definitely, you know, travel again as well. I've been quite lucky with my family just to travel when I was young, but, you know, do that on my own and do exchange for 6 months, like be kind of my own person. Yeah, and just continue to work in spaces like this. I think in the youth-led space, things come up so often and so quickly, and you really have to say yes to everything because that's how you make networks, and that's important. Yeah.
What parts of the world call you to travel and to seek and to explore?
Like actual places or
regions of the world?
Yeah, I'm actually going back to Vietnam in February, which is exciting. With some friends, so that'll be different to traveling with my family. But yeah, I think I'll feel a closer connection to that, or maybe I'll feel a more distant connection. Who knows? Like I'm not sure how that'll be. But yeah, I just, you know, I love the snow. I really want to. You know, I've been very fortunate to ski overseas and go to places like that. So just go back to places I've been. Also, like I think in a different way. But I think studying overseas will be really different to just traveling alone because you have to make a whole new life there, and I'm excited to do that for a good solid half a year or so. Yeah.
Is there anywhere in particular that you want to study and put some roots down for those 6 months or a semester?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll be doing it when I have law electives. So doing like human rights law in Geneva, let's say, would be really cool. But to live in Geneva would be really expensive, so not sure. But yeah, I'm not quite at that application process yet. But I mean, Denmark, Copenhagen, places like that would be really good. Somewhere accessible that I could just travel on the weekend would be ideal. Yeah, not sure yet.
So in terms of human rights, there's a lot that's not going right in the world. What type of I'm curious on what regions, what problems that you're interested in exploring and eventually helping to be part of the solution for.
Yeah. I was saying to Jasper before we started recording, like there's always jobs in human rights, sadly, because there's so much going on in the world. But I think, I didn't always have I've always said I've had a drive, but I've never had a passion. Like it's never been a passion until year 10 for human rights. I did work experience at a law firm in the social justice department, and they were starting their class action for unlawful detention in Australia and asylum seekers and refugees. So there was a class action for that, and that was just like crazy because I was like, how old are you in year 10? 16, and I was having these calls with these, you know, refugees who had been unlawfully detained, and that's when I was like, wow, like there is so much wrong with the world, and it happens so close to home. Like Australian politics in itself is like, you know, so problematic in its own ways. But I guess that's when, you know, I think refugee advocacy has been a big one. First Nations justice is just, there's so many things close to home that are so problematic. And I think when I was younger, I used to think, oh my gosh, like we have to end racism everywhere. We have to end poverty. Like, we have to end asylum seekers. Like, that would be like, you have to end 90 million people like internally displaced. Like, you can't do that. You can't just end it. So I think that's something I've learned over the past few years working in this space, working in this multicultural space, is you really have to start at the start, and you have to start, you can't just solve everything like that. And that's been quite hard to kind of like comprehend, because in that way you're like, oh my gosh, like what can I do? But yeah, I guess in Australia there's just so much to do. Yeah.
As young people, we grow up very idealistic,
Yeah.
right? We think we can change the world. We think we can do everything, and I think that's the energy that we need to maintain.
Yeah, for sure.
We go through and we try and do these projects. We get knocked back down, and then you can very easily become jaded. You can say, "Look, I'm not good enough. It's not worth it. I want to give up. I'm just going to lounge around, eat my Cheetos, and watch Netflix or something like that."
Yeah.
But it's the ability to get back up, to rise back up, and to really find your community, finding like-minded people who can help you stand up when you're down, or who you could extend a hand to lift others up. And living in service that way really is fulfilling, and it helps you move forward every day, and it helps you solve the problems that you're passionate about too.
Yeah, and you can't do it alone. I think that's also the thing. You have to comprehend, like, it's not just you. You need friends, you need contacts, and I think that's a main part of life. Like, make those connections, make those conversations. Yeah.
Sounds like a beautiful conversation, and might be a good time to ask Rosie the three questions, Jasper.
All right, so 3 questions. What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for my mom and dad. Like, they have just given me just like the most amazing life. Like, I just, as I've spoken about, I just feel it so deeply. And I always tell them, like, I get emotional with them. I'm just like, how I feel, you literally, like, I go above and beyond, and they're always like, no, but like, it's like how people always tell me it's how anyone would treat their biological daughter or son. But I'm like, no, it's just, I could have ended up anywhere. And I think that's how I feel really grateful, and I feel it really intensely. So that's been, a lot.
And I can feel it, like, when you're sharing your story, I was like getting like goosebumps. I was like, oh my God, like, this is incredible. Very wholesome conversation. Second question, what have you realized?
Ooh, I need a time frame on that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of spoken about, like, we've realized we can't change everything, but I've realized that, like, to be vulnerable is really important. I think I've really been busy my whole life. I've never, like, since I was like in year 6, I've had sport. I've always kept myself busy. And maybe that was a coping mechanism of, like, trying to comprehend that I do have, like, a place. So I think I've realized over the past year that, like, all these emotions that I've just felt have maybe been built up. I'm not sure, but, like, you really need to feel that, and you need to have time for yourself, because it's not like I haven't made time for myself, but I've always just been like, oh, I'm more effective if I've got this on, then I'll study, for example. So yeah, I've realized I really need to, work on myself a bit. Like, I need to give myself time, and I need to feel really vulnerable. And that's something I've learned the past year, trying to, juggle these identities. Yeah.
Final question. What is the question you ask yourself?
There's a few. What's the question I ask myself? Yeah, I often ask myself, what more can I do? Like, sometimes I go to youth events, and I see these amazing speakers talk, and then I leave. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to do more. Like, I feel really angry, and I'm like, I need to, like, make a foundation or something. Like, I need to make a business. I need to, and I do often ask myself, what can I do more? And I think the last year I've really been asking myself, who am I? Has been, I guess, I feel like also I don't think I'd be asking myself this if I wasn't studying, like, and interrogating my subject position to race, because I don't think if I was doing science, let's say, nothing on science, people, but like I don't think I would have had like such a like deep like, oh my gosh, who am I? Yeah, I think I'm finally getting to that definition. We're not there yet. And I mean, people change. Everyone's always evolving. But yeah, who am I guess? Yeah.
Like when I came on the podcast for the first time, that was what I said.
Really?
Who am I is the question that I asked
Yeah.
myself. And as we take this journey, and look, I've got 10 years on you, I'm still asking myself, who am I?
Yeah.
Right? And
Evolving.
I'm assuming people at 70 will continue to ask themselves, who am I? What is my place in the world? How can I deliver value? How can I make an impact for not just myself, but
Yeah.
my community, generations
What can I
beyond?
do? Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but before we close up, I just want to circle back to you receiving 200-page documents and a stack of papers, right? And reading lives that you could have lived.
Yeah, I mean, they were blurted out, but there were like the fact that you can see that there are like my mum and dad, and then there are 2 other families that I could have maybe gone to, which would have been pushed down from a lot more.
What were the other families? Did you
No,
learn
it's-
any
no.
other details from them?
No, it's really private. The whole adoption system is in itself. I think there needs to be a lot more written on it and done, and there needs to be a lot more about open adoptions and the way children have responded to that. And I think, I think there's our adoption system in Australia is great compared to the US, let's say, for example. But I think there's no one knows anything, and I think adopted people need to be the ones to advocate for that. And they're going through their own stories, but it's quite hard. But yeah, I guess receiving those documents was just like, holy moly, like it was quite overwhelming. Like and then it's kind of like I always knew that I would find her though. Like I never, the adoption agency has to be like, there's a chance that she may have passed away, but I just knew in my heart, like I knew that it would come, and it came quite quickly. It was but now it's interesting. Like as I said, I've had in year 12, let's say, I was like, okay, I'll do my journey, I'll find it, and that's always been like my purpose. Actually, like that's my thing I'm gonna do. Now that I've done it, I'm like, oh my gosh, now what? Like I because there's still constant wondering with like biological dad, let's say. But yeah, it's just it feels really, I can't really comprehend that it's kind of not complete, nowhere near complete, but that I've like discovered her. So yeah, that's been quite interesting.
Who am I? Who am I?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Well, Rosie, just want to thank you for spending your Sunday Arvo with us and sharing with us your stories and being so candid and open.
Yeah, well,
about
thank
them as
you.
well.
So
Thank you.
this is quite a big deal because it's the first time I've kind of shared my adoption story like publicly. I've spoken to friends, obviously everyone knows me that I've grown up with, but yeah, thank you for giving me the platform to kind of talk about it. And I mean, in the off chance that anyone is listening and that may have a connection to adopted people or an adopted person, just hit me up because it's really interesting, and if anyone has questions, I'd love to talk about it. But yeah, thank you so much again.
Where can people find you?
I guess Instagram. My name's just Rosie Thyer. You can find that there. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way, and just Google me. I guess
LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn.
All those platforms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Facebook.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Rosie.
Thank
It
you.
was an absolute pleasure speaking to you and meeting you. Well, we hope you found value in this podcast. Always stay safe, always take care, and always get up. Peace.
Okiru.